Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today. Are you ready for probably the most wild rumor we've heard when it comes to Bethesda Game Studios? I didn't expect this one. You know, when I think of remakes and remaster rumors, naturally my Fallout-ridden brain goes straight to that series. But if I were to truly give an honest guess at a game that deserves a remake from Bethesda Game Studios, it's probably Morrowind, given the heritage, given the fact that this is the game that saved the studio, and quite frankly, given that it's one of the hardest to get into beyond the likes of Daggerfall and the original Elder Scrolls. I feel like that, in the terms of a modern remake, is a fantastic candidate. However, today, we're not getting into any of that. We're talking about Elder Scrolls for Oblivion, and a rumor that Virtuos Game Studios is actually working on a remake for this game, which has gained a ton of traction. We see a lot of websites now covering it. A lot of you have asked for my thoughts, and while I know a lot of you anticipated me to be losing my mind, and in a way I am, I'm actually really nervous about this for many, I think, legitimate reasons. Virtuos just had a pretty bad outing recently. I don't know if they're trustworthy. Also, if this rumor is true, based off the engine they're using, I'm also kind of concerned. There's a lot of red flags here to me. While as a Bethesda Game Studios fan, I am very excited. As a gamer looking for a quality product here, I'm a little worried if we're going to lose some of the BGS spirit here, but I will get into all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. If you are new here and you're into Bethesda games, news, information, whether it be Elder Scrolls, Fallout, or of course, Starfield, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Let's begin at the root of this rumor, where, ladies and gentlemen, the post has now been deleted. However, I have it here in a screenshot. I am an ex-employee of the company, and here are some projects that they are working on, being Virtuos Games. Sadly, I couldn't take any screenshots or whatever to exactly prove my words, but well. First, there is the Alter project, which is a remaster/remake of Oblivion. The discussion for it being a full remake are still ongoing. I'll have thoughts on that in a moment. It is done currently using a pairing system, so it means the remaster is running both using an Unreal Engine 5 project and the old Oblivion one. For instance, new graphics are rendered in the Unreal 5 project, but most of the gameplay, physics, etc. is still done in Oblivion. It should be released end of next year, early 25, depending mostly on if it's a remake or remaster. It is mostly done in Paris, but Black Shamrock also helps the studio for the art. Why would we give this any sort of attention at all beyond a bunch of websites talking about it? Well, as you'll see here, one of the mods over at Gaming Leaks and Rumors on Reddit said, "Folks, this person identity has been verified with us. We obviously won't say anything more to protect their privacy, but their claim of ex-employee of the company is verified." So what that means is that there is a little bit something here to run away with in the terms of they work there, so it seems like they may know about what we're talking about mostly today, an Oblivion remake in Unreal Engine 5. Okay, so before I get into who Virtuos is and my thoughts on really the remake itself, let's look at some things that are mentioned here and call a spade here. First of all, how do we not know if the game's about to release about a year from now or early 25 that it's a full-on remake? I mean, maybe it's kind of like Crisis Core, where I feel like that game really is a remake with how they redid the DMW system. The combat is much more better in terms of flow. Visually, it looks fantastic, but Square Enix is like, no, it's a remaster. So there are games that walk that line, and maybe this is one of them. But I feel like if you work there and you're almost about to release this thing, it would be pretty clear what it is. So that's one thing I saw and went, I don't know. I feel like you'd be pretty aware of this by this point in time, which way you're going in the project. If not, it's probably far earlier and would be out far later. That's how I'm looking at it. Meanwhile, the other thing that I'm a bit concerned about is what I see a lot of the gaming community talking about, which is Unreal Engine 5 running this. So it seems like the way that this poster is framing it is that you would still maintain the crazy physics of a Bethesda Game Studios game, the gameplay style, because it's still done in Oblivion, but it's hosted in an Unreal Engine 5 project. I personally feel like the only instances of this that I can call to mind are what we heard about with the GTA trilogy, which we know how that turned out. That was in Unreal Engine, but it was using some of the game's original code to run within Unreal Engine. Meanwhile, another example of multiple engines within a singular game is Halo Master Chief Collection. And while I love MCC now, big tip of the cap to 3434, their efforts on that, that game started off in a pretty rough place. So not that this means it's doomed from the start. By any means, every project is different, but I worry about the very chaotic nature of a Bethesda Game Studios engine crashing head on into another as someone who works in Unreal Engine, very unpredictable, kind of buggy engine that can be really weird. We call them Unreal problems when things just randomly disappear. I don't know how this is going to go, but based off my personal experience, I'm like, oh, this wouldn't be my ideal pick, especially looking at GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. So there are some worries there. And also modding, let's be honest, like modding is what keeps these BGS games relevant and alive for years beyond just being, hey, that was a good time. It's that you can keep adding to the experience. Fans can get into game development and add to the experience and then go work at Bethesda Game Studios. It's the hand that feeds, if you will. And so I find it strange that if you were working on Unreal Engine, that kind of can cut off that avenue of the game. It's not impossible to mod, but of course, with like Gamebryo, with Creation Engine, with all that stuff that has been innovated upon for years, modding, I believe, would become a lot more difficult. So those are things worth considering before we even get into Virtuos. Okay, so if you watch my channel a lot, you know I reviewed The Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition. At least I tried to. That game was awful, and I love The Outer Worlds, by the way. That is one of my favorite RPGs of the last generation, and as people get further and further from it, I see them continue to slander it. I continue to defend it. I think that game rules. So when I saw this name, I went, that looks familiar. Oh no, and then I remembered. Yeah, so the developers behind the very broken, the easy slam dunk video game, Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition, which was just a meager graphical upgrade, some better frame rate, and they botched it completely. The game barely ran. It was so bad that Private Division had to submit an apology for it. But this is what I would call a rogue team. Like you'll see here on their website, it says, discover how Virtuos recreated the cinematic introduction of the iconic AAA title for its remake, Demon's Souls, taking charge of the full production pipeline for conceptualization to compositing and rendering. Meanwhile, with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it says crafting innovative and memorable experiences for gamers was at the heart of Eidos Montreal's mission. Discover how Virtuos became an integral part of the game development process with support across multiple areas, including art, level design, and gameplay, bringing Shadow of the Tomb Raider to life. Both these games came out really well, but that's because Virtuos wasn't the main team working on them. So when you see Virtuos was the main team working on something like the Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition, sorry, I can't have too much faith in you. It's a little worrying. So that is the tail of the tape behind who's potentially working on this remake. And now we get into a couple other things. I think the number one question I had, which I posed at the beginning of the video, is why Oblivion? Now, for those who don't know, Oblivion was my first ever true BGS game experience. Really, it was Morrowind as a kid. That game blew my mind, but it was so big and difficult and overwhelming that I just could not complete the game. So years later, I get my 360, and one of the first games I pick up on it that I was completely addicted to was Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. The faction quest lines, the openness, the dungeons. It was just an incredible time that I sank, like many of you out there, hundreds of hours into. And so for me as a fan, like, yeah, give me that all day. Why would you remake Oblivion? Let's just look at the dungeons. Every single dungeon in that game was made by one single person. I think that tells you all you need to know because, yeah, there's a lot of templates, a lot of reusage. And while the quests and writing in Oblivion, in my opinion, are fantastic, like the Dark Brotherhood just really speaks for itself. But given that Bethesda Game Studios was a team formerly known for punching above their weight, you had one person making all the dungeons, and yeah, back then, super impressive for its time in 2006. But nowadays, if you go back to Oblivion, nostalgia carries some of the weight in that. So that would be something that could be immediately fixed in a remake. There's also the, I'd say more awkward, if you will, dialogue that could be ameliorated here, where the camera zooms in and fixes very closely just around their head. And at the same time, you have the funky persuasion system where the facial animations change dramatically. There's a lot of things that are kind of janky about Oblivion that I love, but I think could use a little bit of fixing up. My pick personally, yeah, would have been Morrowind. I know it takes a mountain of effort, but that's what a full-on remake would be, right? I mean, of course, when it comes to voice acting, with the amount of writing that's in Morrowind, yeah, it would be a lot of work. No sugarcoating that. Why, that could also be a good candidate for a remaster too. I also wonder if Bethesda Game Studios is the one who signed off on this. Remember, they are now a Microsoft-owned studio. And what I have to say is this is, I don't know, I don't want to speak for all Elder Scrolls fans, but like they need something. They need something. And I think with the wait for Elder Scrolls 6, getting something new beyond just a new ESO expansion sounds pretty good to me. Again, I have my concerns for sure. And then, of course, we can't just ignore that Oblivion exists. Oblivion, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm Bethesda, if I'm Microsoft, don't go for Virtuos. Hire these folks, make this an official product somehow, and release it to the public. I mean, they've put years and years and years of their life into it. This game looks fantastic, and quite frankly, if Virtuos does not deliver, if this ends up being real and they do not deliver, and you got this mod coming in right afterwards, I mean, there's being set up for a huge slam dunk. Just tee it up, boom, see you later. So that's the other thing. Oblivion, I feel bad for that team if this ends up being true, because it almost feels unfair to them. I mean, if this ends up being true, by the way, just all that they've gone through to make this possible, all the hiring, everything, and they're so close to the finish line, and then it's lining up with a potential remake from Virtuos. Again, the possibility of them just showing up Virtuos is very much there. There's no denying that, where people will have an alternative, and that's the benefit of the gaming market, right? We will have alternatives, and Oblivion would be free, so there's also that. But I have worries, y'all. And I know a lot of people clicked on this video like, oh, Matty's got to be losing his mind right now. And like, part of me is like, if I see this and it looks good, oh, we're flipping the switch. We're flipping the switch. No doubt about it. Don't get it twisted. I'll be fanboying up a storm. But right now, the objectivity in me, just looking at the words on paper, if we're to believe this and really run with it, there's a couple of red flags here that I just can't ignore. So those are my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, on what's going on with Virtuos, what's going on with this Oblivion remake, this very unlikely rumor that just popped up out of nowhere, is getting covered by a lot of websites. I wanted to offer my thoughts and, of course, hear what you think. Are you on board with an Oblivion remake? Is there something that Matty is missing here, perhaps? Is there something that gives you encouragement? Look, I want to be right there on the hype train from the get-go here. But there's a lot of reservations I personally have about this Alter project. Nonetheless, still exciting to know that Bethesda Game Studios could finally be stepping into remakes and remasters. Last thought is, I worry about if this doesn't do well. I want a Fallout New Vegas and 3 remaster package so bad, just so it's there on modern consoles, new bells and whistles, console mods, Creation Club, all that fun stuff. I want it so bad. But if they mess this up being Virtuos, I just wonder what Bethesda wants to do. They'll be like, see, we told you so. This is why we don't want to remake and remaster. So those are my closing thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Please let me know yours down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the heck out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.